wow, it feels good to be back. It has been a while. I've been on hiatus and I've returned. Thank you, Hubscale and the team, for bringing back Risking It All, the only podcast that matters that asks the hard, difficult, awkward questions on the back end of the year, where I've done 330,000 miles in the air across several continents, multiple countries, and goodness knows how many cities. But I am happy to be back, and we have a killer season of people to ask and speak to. All things from direct competitors of my own company to people like Joe Sullivan, the CISO or former CISO of Uber, and everything else in between. It is going to be amazing. So I'm glad and grateful you're with me. Thank you again to Hubscale for being part of this. They're probably some of the best recruiters in the business. If you are looking to hire or to be hired, then reach out to them. Also, for the benefit of your future engagement with this podcast, please drop your email or some form of contact in the chat, and we'll be sure to include you in all future reach out notifications. Wow. I am live from Atlanta on my last US leg of this year. And today I have started with an easy conversation. We're going to talk about religion, divorce, data breaches, and everything else in between. I have one of my dearest friends on to start softball for me. So we'll start some softballs for him. Same as ever, if you have questions, you want to argue, you want to heckle, throw them in the chat. There are no rules, and I will read out anything you write as long as it is not obscenely offensive. So without further ado, my dear friend, CISO, advisor, investor, Terry O'Daniel. Let's bring him on and let's start the conversation. Terry, how are you?
Good to see you, Jake. It's been delightful to see you several times in the past few months, and I am excited and terrified to be here with you with a live mic.
Mate, as is on my podcast, there is no script, there is no questions, there is no double takes. If my Wi-Fi breaks on the hotel Wi-Fi, then goodness knows what happens. We'll start the same way that I've started everyone. I will ask for your name introduction, and then the three questions I ask everyone: your hero, your hobby, and the biggest risk you ever took in life.
Gosh. Well, I'll start by an intro. Hi, folks. I'm Terry O'Daniel. I'm a CISO these days. I never planned to be a CISO. I never planned to work in security. I always thought security folks were very fussy, and I never wanted to be one of them. But I started as a network engineer, and I had the good fortune to stumble into a whole bunch of roles in the Silicon Valley, working for small, scrappy startups, and eventually moved from being an infrastructure operations engineer to working in security, working for some large enterprises, working for some startups and scale-ups. And now I do a whole bunch of advising and investing, and I'm loving it, frankly. I love being part of the security community. I love mentoring folks who are working their way up through the ranks and just helping people find their place to shine. And you'll probably have to remind me of the three questions again, Jake. But my hero, my goodness. I think I have to say one of my heroes is not necessarily one of the best humans I've ever met, but
Interesting.
had such I mean, it's not like, I'm going to say MLK or Gandhi or something, but someone I had a close relationship with early in my career who took a chance on me and put me into some of my first leadership positions. He's passed on now. His name was Robert Poon, and he's from Hong Kong. And he gave me some opportunities to step into leadership roles that I frankly wasn't ready for. But he did more than that. He really took an interest in helping me develop who I am, being authentic, how to bring that as a superpower to the business world, and was not shy about giving me direct critical feedback on where I was doing well and where I wasn't. But it was always tempered with the desire that he wanted to see me succeed. So I always felt that he felt like a kindly uncle saying, kind of lovingly slapping you upside the head and saying, "Hey, idiot, don't do that. Do this instead." And he passed away, I don't know, about 10 years ago, pretty suddenly. And I don't know if I've appreciated him enough when I was working for him, because it was a hard boss to work for. He set the bar really high, but he made me want to help others, and he made me want to be myself and not compromise that, but also find ways to help other people shine and just find the thing that makes them unique and special and help them navigate the like pitfalls and everything of the corporate world and having a job and dealing with high pressure situations. And I like to think that I've found my own way to sort of, pay it forward for what he did for me with some of my mentees and just some of the work I do in the community. So yeah, that's I think that I'd call him a personal hero.
You're the
Uh,
first person I've ever had who's gone for a mentor. I've had lots of my mum, my dad, lots of famous figures, but no one's ever called their mentor out before. I think it's interesting. I've talked a lot before about a guy called Ben Jepson, who was my boss at
yeah.
NCC Group, who
Mhm.
similarly is a guy who I owe a lot to as a mentor because he just gave me chances I clearly wasn't ready for and just hoped I would work it out as I went along. And I did. And I think that those are the kind of people in our lives that we look back and whatever current relationship we have with them, we think, you know what, like I wouldn't be where I am without that person who decided for whatever
Yeah.
reason, I'll never know why, that I'm the one they wanted to gamble on. Interesting. What about your hobby? Let's go next. Hobby?
Music, and actually, since you mentioned
Yeah.
parents, my mother used to be an opera singer. My father was a jazz musician. I've always been surrounded by music, and I grew up in a very musical household. The house was always full of entertainers and musicians, and there was always a big piano in the main living room, and someone was always on the piano, usually my dad, playing something. And many a night as a kid, I fell asleep. Um, Usually on the couch reading, listening to my dad just like write compose something on the piano and figure it out, and just doing the same like variation something over and over again, which is probably how I got into electronic music and trance music and things like that, was just hearing him sort of create that same sound over and over. Maybe it just unlocked something in my brain. So I've
Mm,
been a guitarist, I've been a bassist in a rock band. These days, I play less hands-on music, and I'm much more interested in electronic music and DJing and finding ways to, create an entire experience or set or something like that. And I've had a few amazing experiences to play in front of people. Um, and I like to think that I've tried to, without pushing them, uh, just instill a curiosity and an openness to different kinds of music in my kids. And sometimes it's
interesting.
amazing, and sometimes they listen to the crappiest pop I've ever heard, and I try to smile along with a straight face and be supportive. But sometimes I play screaming fast, melt your face Dutch hardcore for them, and they're cool enough that they can put up with it, and they may tell me like, "Oh, I don't like that," but thank you.
Yeah.
So always
Yeah.
music. Yeah, it's always part of my life. I don't, I know people who can just live a life without music. They're not fussed if it's just music on or not. That is not me.
I've spent many a day in the car recently listening to K-pop Demon Hunters, so I can very much appreciate the fact that musical taste you can somewhat pass down, but you just can't force, you have to live with it. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken in life?
I think moving to San Francisco. I went to college. I was living in Los Angeles, and I went to college up here in Northern California, and I'd never really been to Northern California. And I visited San Francisco several times, and I just fell in love. It just has this energy. And back at the time, it was funny. San Francisco before tech was known to be sort of a financial city and kind of a city of rebels, and pirates, I guess, for the lack of a better word, and musicians. There was a lot of musical talent in San Francisco, a lot of the arts, a lot of theater and things like that. And I just after school, I decided, after visiting a few times, I just picked up and moved here. And I almost starved. And I had to
Almost
very quick
starved.
I I did not find a job in the arts, and I did not find anyone willing to just, you know, fund me and my desire to create weird avant-garde things and performances and things like that. But I had always been a nerdy little hacker as a kid, and
Yeah.
I always thought of it as a hobby. I never thought of it. I never associated it with like. I certainly didn't go to school to learn computer science. That didn't interest me, and I didn't see it as something that I wanted to pursue as a career. But when the rent is due, as needs must, I um, I got a job. Again, someone just took a risk on me, and I convinced them that I had actually done the work at scale, which was not true. I had only done it for like friends and family and things like that. And they took a risk on me and gave me a job, and I did really well. And I thankfully I was able to make my rent and buy groceries. And and it unlocked a whole career for me that I never intended. I thought I would be an academic or something like that, and maybe a teacher. I had no desire and I had no view of what it would look like to work in tech. At the time, from the outside, tech was not the hot, cool thing. It was like, IT and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
networking and things like that. So I took a risk. I moved here. It worked out. I met some amazing people. I got my first job, like real job in tech, at a startup. I did pretty well in the interview, but I know I landed the role because the head of design at the startup was a DJ at a rave I'd been to that past weekend. And in the interview, I called out like, "Oh my God, your set was amazing!" And I'm pretty sure that's why it was like, "Okay, this kid's cool. Let's bring him on board."
So your background and parentage is obviously deeply musical and artistic. And I know from our conversations, you also grew up religious and in actually a choir boy, literally like musically religiosity. So,
Yes.
like, does that convert? Like, does that contribute? Like, you talked about authenticity in the beginning in your first kind of intro. So, being who you
Yeah.
are, right? And so, do those parts of your past and who you are make you who you are today? Like, is music something that should be embraced in the cyber world? Is I mean, you obviously moved away from your beliefs, but does religion help people be authentic and be more trustworthy, credible, or less credible? Like, explain to me a bit about how your
Mm,
past makes you who you are in the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess.
wow. That's a big question. Yeah, I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy. I was a choir boy. Um, one of my claims to fame as a little kid was I sang. I was the cantor, like the lead singer in the choir for Hulk Hogan's wedding. I guess his first wedding.
What?
Um, but stuff's weird in Los Angeles, man. You just run into random celebrities, and yeah, I was. So for me, religion was very much a cultural thing, right? It was like you go to church, you do these activities. I went to a Catholic school, and it was just part of what you did. And I have moved away from following organized religion, but I will say, sort of coming back to your question, I am an eternal agnostic. And by that I mean I don't trust anyone who thinks they have everything figured out. And
Yeah,
so I guess in my life, anyone who's absolutely sure that they've picked or just happen to be born into the right religion and all the others are wrong, eh, it's hard for me to swallow. And likewise, anyone who is absolutely convinced that they know how the universe works, and there's nothing beyond the absolute material, and love is nothing more than a collision of chemicals. eh, I don't believe that either. And the I do think in cyber a healthy skepticism and a real embrace of diversity of perspectives. I know that there's been sort of the pendulum has swung back and forth here in the US for the past few years about diversity, but I I think cyber is one of the areas where if you don't get a diversity of opinions, if you don't look around and get different people's perspectives, you're sunk. So,
yeah, I agree.
not religion per se, but I do think you do have to find your own truth. You do have to be a seeker of truth, for lack of a better word. And I do think that, most people I know who I really enjoy talking with and spending time with and who are authentic either have, sort of picked a path and they're walking that path, or they're they're searching.
It's interesting. Um, do you think that people in security search more than other people do for meaning? I think I have more conversations in tech about tech is predominantly quite a liberal industry, agnostic, science over beliefs, but I feel like I have more religious conversations in the CISO and security world than I do in any other community.
That's
And I don't really
fascinating.
know why.
I will say it is markedly different. When I started out as a network engineer, the assumption was that I came out of the military, because at the time when I started in tech, the only people I would literally walk into a room and I would be asked the question, spook or nuke? Because they assumed as a network engineer, I was either part of the intelligence community and probably stationed on some remote island, scanning signals, or that I was on a submarine. So spook or nuke, they would ask, because I was a network
Yeah,
engineer. And I would say that community is different. There are fewer seekers. No foul to them, but they are much more cut and dried, much more certain. Whereas I
yeah,
do think, yeah, I think people in security are curious, endlessly just, I mean, why would you pick such a horrible field that just grinds you to a pulp unless you couldn't help yourself, right? There was
yeah,
something about it that just makes you, you never run out of problems. You're always having to deal with the latest change or something like that.
yeah. It's interesting. Let's change gears. You've been in a few data breaches, right?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, data breach is a loaded word, but yeah, yeah. I
It
mean, I
is.
think sometimes, yeah.
Let
I
me
mean,
reframe the question. So let me reframe the question. What's it like to be in a data breach? Let me give you some context first. So
mm,
I've been a few in my time, and one particularly, which pretty much epitomizes to me what I think when I think of CISO data breach. I got a call at like 3 in the morning UK time. I was in bed.
yeah,
The CEO rang me and said, "You need to look at this." I got to my laptop, bleary eyed, like one half contact in, and looked and went, "Oh crap! Like somebody is in our AWS. They shouldn't be
ugh,
there."
ugh,
And from that, I didn't
wow,
really sleep for like 2 weeks, right? And then you move on, you learn lessons, and it's great, and budgets free up, and it's wonderful, right? But that
yeah.
initial time, those first few hours, that first day, that you theoretically trained your life for, right? We run tabletops, we learn about instant response. We're the guys that can solve the crisis. What's going on in your head when you that first hits the proverbial fan?
I think you know me well enough to know that I'm a terribly arrogant person, but this may come across as arrogant. Um, Coming from the ops engineering world, I don't have some of that same. I've already worked out all those like adrenaline rush reactions early in my career, in operational pages. Right, you get the page, you're the only one who can get the site back up. You've got people screaming at you to get it done. There's
Yeah,
pressure. I I've had many of those. Actually, the 4 o'clock ones, for some reason, to me, hit harder because it's like you've passed the night and it's almost the morning, and yeah. So I did have to do a lot with a lot of those in my career, working for small startups. Things fall over all the time. There's, sometimes you're in the middle of trying to land a deal, or you just landed a new customer, and there's intense pressure. So that part of it doesn't. I feel like more like I'm a seasoned firefighter who's used to the bell ringing and just having to, like, having my system to get up and get moving and all that. But I will say the toughest part is the human element of, I hate to say it, but I love my job, but I have worked with some terrible human beings in leadership. And I think I am a not only a believer, but a pressure tested Gnostic of the fact that the only really useful path in life is kindness and empathy. right?
Mm,
You don't know what someone else is going through. Everyone's got their own story, but the minimum you can do is approach other people with kindness and empathy, especially if you're going to deal with them more than once. I suppose you could take a like utilitarian view and say like, well, I'm never going to meet that person again, so fuck it. But if leadership can't be supportive, and if leadership can't trust that, I haven't been up for 2 weeks for fun or for my health. I'm doing the absolute best I can. And what I found is sometimes leadership just doesn't extend the grace to say, like, hey, what can we do for you? Is there anything you need? Do you need us to like send dinner to your house? Do you want us to, anything like that? And what's wrong with people? I mean, you've been through that fire,
yeah. There's
right?
three components to it, right? There is firstly like well, it was you. Like it's your fault we're having a data breach. And I'm like, it's not my bloody fault. The engineering went crazy. Like, and
Yeah,
also immediately, like all the fingers go and say, right, this is now you. And I'm like, read the DRBCP. This isn't just me. Like, I
yeah,
don't own this.
yeah.
I advise on this. And then you're right. Like, you limiting the damage should be commended, but it's considered to be the bare minimum of your job. And anything less than that, and it's your failure, even though you might have like you basically inherited a burning building. What you like, you try and put the
Right.
fire out. I think that's interesting. Let me change a different question. So I've asked this question to a few CISOs, and I told you in advance by the time the thing it was coming. But I think that all CISOs, and I think you included, and maybe you'll disagree, but I think what you've said to me today affirms it. Like we're all inherently quite control, like we're control dominated. We're almost control freaks. Like we feel like we've got it's why we take the job. Like you said the same thing in
Yeah.
keeping pages up and dealing with fires. Like we feel like we can do what other people can't do. We manage shit, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now you're divorced, right? It's no secret. It's open.
Yeah.
But that is a situation in your life that you can't control. You can't
Oof.
manage, right? There is a relationship point where you don't have full control there. Whether you initiated it or whether you didn't initiate it. Either way, it's irrelevant. Like relationships that involve children, families, and spouses when they break down, you can't have control. Like how how
Hmm.
hard is that? How much does it affect like your job? How much does it affect your feelings about how much control you have in the world? Like, does it change how you think about things? You know what I'm getting at? I'm kind
Listen,
of picking and
no,
trying to see
yeah,
where it goes.
it's really interesting, and and what you called out about being a dominant personality type in the not an asshole, but like wanting to control
Didn't say
things, right?
asshole.
Right, exactly. But wanting to have your hands on the steering wheel, right? Rather than the passenger. Um, it's interesting you framed it that way because, I don't know that I was as comfortable with that element of myself, be it in the workplace. You know me, I'm a pretty sociable, go along, get along kind of
Yeah.
guy. I can talk to anyone. I think we're similar in that regard. And sometimes that affability was my fallback position rather than laying down the law, saying this is how things are in various areas of my life. And I think that sometimes that creates a vacuum. It's like sometimes if you're not willing to sort of step up and say, this is the way things are. Not that you can control it, right? You can't control anyone but yourself, but not providing that leadership, I think sometimes it pulls something, dark or maladaptive out of other people, and it creates a pressure in the relationship where you drift apart, where people get into conflict, where the conflict compounds, and there's no like end in sight. There's no way to resolve the conflict. Everyone has conflict, but there's no way to sort of come back to a central point. So I will say that, you know, going through the divorce, learning how to communicate, going deeper into my, understanding what makes me tick and understanding what my values are. Sometimes I didn't see like the sort of calm, strong leadership displayed or modeled for me when I was younger, and I had to kind of figure it out on my own. And but years of therapy and years of self-exploration um, have brought me out the other side where you can't change the past, you can only change the future. But I would have done things differently in my relationship. I would have made different
What would you have done
choices.
differently? Give me one
Well,
thing you would have done differently if you went back to the start.
um, set been a leader, frankly. I think I would have stepped up a little more, and instead of saying, what do you want so much? Because I think that for me, one of the we all have holes that we're trying to fill. And for me, one of the holes I was trying to fill was making other people happy. And
Mm,
I thought that if I just, was would just go along and ask and how I could make the other person happy, how I can make my partner happy, and do whatever they want, and just sort of, a partnership is a partnership. Let them get away with, anything. Then they'd like me. And at one point, I had a really good friend who said to me, seek authenticity, not approval. And it
mm,
just
it's a
unlocked
good
something
one.
in me. Yeah. And I realized how much I was creating that vacuum by stepping back and saying, well, what do you want? Rather than
Yeah.
leading forward and saying, do you want this or this? Right, and narrowing it down and providing that leadership and just saying, look, this doesn't work for me, and just setting some of those boundaries and sticking to them. And I think, honestly, that applies to life, to not
Well, I was
just
going to say, actually, do you think that that's been, you talked about you being, I mean, submissive is potentially the word here, right? Like being open to just to pleasing. Like, do you
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's been difficult in your career? Do you think that sometimes not just you,
yeah,
but CISO in general, because we just say yes, we then take on a lot of things which we
yeah,
actually can't deliver. And then when people say, well, you failed and like you are terminated or you're fired or whatever happens, right? Or you have to walk away, like you feel like you failed, but it's because you said yes to things that were physically
yes,
not possible because the nature of you is just to go, yeah, sure, I'll do it.
absolutely. This is probably controversial, but I tell some of my mentees when they get to like their first head of security type job or leadership role, and I don't say it this bluntly, but I say pick a fight early. Like pick
Yeah,
something and find a way to establish where you will bend but not break, and how you
yeah.
navigate that. Because do it early, not in the middle of that 3 a.m. call when everything's terrible. Find a way to start navigating those relationships, because that's what they are, whether it's a personal or a business. Figure a way to navigate those relationships and establish your position early on. And that when something real happens, you've at least exercised that muscle. You've sort of shown people again where you're willing to bend but not break, and you aren't. I think you hit the nail on the head. You aren't submissive. You aren't just saying, "Oh, thank you for the paycheck. What do you want me to do?" And then just taking the blame when everything goes wrong.
Let me ask a deep question. I'll try and work out how to phrase this properly.
Oh,
But
these haven't been deep questions, so now we're moving into the deep questions. I see.
man, I'm going easy. So you obviously talked about a lot about what you've learned since you went through like a family breakdown, and you've gone through counseling and therapy, and you feel like you found your authentic self. And I see that you are in your own skin to a large degree, right? And I think that's a commendable attribute. But I
Thanks.
guess the difficult question is that a good thing? Let me give some context. So like obviously you've got kids, so you've had difficult relationships with your kids as you've gone through a marital breakdown. It's left you in a better place, but you're probably better professionally and personally because of it. But I feel like
Mm.
no one ever wants to recommend divorce and family breakdown as like a course for career progression.
Yeah,
So
not
like
recommended.
I guess that's my question. Like, do you think that sometimes you have to burn the house down to like build it back, or do you think these are lessons you could have and should have learned earlier that would have like protected your family or your marriage, your kids, or do you think like this was inevitable? Like I'm trying to get to the point of like as your career and your progress in your career has probably become better after these things have happened. How do you see that in the light of a positive, negative thought process?
No, no, it's a really good question. I have thought about it. I don't, it is a natural human relationship, or sorry, it's a natural human reaction to move away from pain. Any animal will do the same.
Yeah.
I think what we can do is not seek out pain, because that's ridiculous, but lean into difficult experiences rather than rushing to, oh gosh, I'm glad that's over. Sitting in painful emotions and just letting it marinate, and turning your like inner eye towards, how am I reacting to this? What is it triggering in me? What is it making me feel? What is it doing to my body? Right? Am my shoulders tense? Am I breathing shallow? I think we don't do enough of that. And I think that's something that you don't have to seek out pain, but you can sit with difficult emotions. You can sit with difficult situations and how you reacted to them. You can sit with imagined pain. We're all going to die. Our loved
Mm,
ones are going to die. We're going to, every loving relationship ends in pain. Unless, I suppose,
interesting.
unless you die at the exact same time, maybe not then. But every other loving relationship will end in pain. The other person will die. They'll go away. Life is suffering, as the first noble truth of Buddhism is. So we can't change that, but we can change ourselves, and we can sit with it, and we cannot shy away from it. So I think, yeah, I earlier in my life, I was happy for bad situations to be done. And it didn't train me, it didn't prepare me for when really terrible things happened. So I think that's one thing we can do differently, is we
Mm,
can, anytime today, sit down and think about, what is it going to be like when your body dies, or your loved ones die. And it's a horrible thing to say, but it's just in your head, right? And it's just a way to bring yourself to, to be comfortable with that, rather than when you get that 3 a.m. call and you have no muscles, you have no training to prepare for that.
and often they come at once, right? I found that when things go wrong in your career, it's always when things are also going wrong in your personal life as well. Like it always feels like life coalesces to give you the worst possible timing, right? I know for you, like exact
Always.
data breaches in the middle of like family distress and breakdowns, right? I think it's interesting. Let me give some a thought to what you said, and I want to ask you a really pointed question. So, there's a series on Disney with Chris Hemsworth. It's really interesting about different emotions, and one of them, the
Oh,
guy that was Thor, and one of them is pain, and he's
yeah.
well known for having long term back pain, and so he goes to these Tibetan monks, and they basically make him do this ritual where he's constantly going up and down and bowing for like I can't remember how long it is. It's about 40 or 50 minutes, and
Wow.
the point is not actually to do anything other than to feel comfortable in your pain. So like you have to learn to sit with the pain. You shouldn't fight
Yeah.
against it. You shouldn't embrace it. You just have to be in it, right? And they talk about sometimes the lesson is not what you learn from it or how you get stronger from it. It's simply the fact that you were in it. And I
Yeah.
think that's interesting. Like, and I think my question is for you, going backwards, would you have done it differently? Do you wish that when you were earlier in that journey that you had sat and tackled your pain early so that you were still in the same relationship, same family that you were before? Or are you happy now with how things have progressed because of where you are now? Like if you could go back and change the clock, would you have done it differently?
Hmm. I mean, it's really hard to say. I am a huge fan of alternative history, and like, what if,
Mm,
the man in the high castle? What
for
if
sure.
the Axis had won the war? I do love thinking
Great
about all the
series, by the
branching
way.
paths. Yeah. Um, so I do think about that. I do think of, what could I have done differently? How would have things worked out? Um, I would say, there were a few absolute points where, in retrospect, with the experience, um, and knowing who I am and what was driving me, um, I didn't make the right choice. I could have done something differently, and it would have led to less pain for fewer people over less time or something like that. Absolutely.
But would you have been the same person professionally that
That's what I
you
was
are
going to
now?
say. I was supposed to say, honestly, I think I am. I mean, I became a much better leader when I became a father, and I became a much better
Yeah, that's true.
and more empathetic person um, when I went through pain, and have become more open and authentic about sharing my personal life, and then it opens other people up to say, "Oh wow, I'm going through this really tough thing right now. Would I have done that before? I probably wouldn't have." So I like who I am
Mm,
today, you know, and I can't, I you know, I there's some specific actions I would have taken differently or sooner or not at all or whatever. Sure, if I were put in that same position, knowing what I know now, um, not even about how things turned out, about like what I need and what's good for me and what's good for other people. But not, what was it? Not Catullus. Someone said, no man steps in the same river twice. Right? The river keeps flowing, and that's time and that's life. And I would not. I
mm,
don't know the person I would be if I weren't this person. So even if that means I was a trillionaire and what have you, it doesn't matter so much, right? That's what's important to me is being comfortable with who I am and embracing the authenticity, the kindness, and the empathy that I think are my superpowers today.
mm. This got deep. There were some technical issues at LinkedIn on the start. So for those who joined us later, the full episode's on YouTube, and we'll share some stuff as well, and we'll fix the LinkedIn in the future. But this moved from religion equals curiosity to data breaches and difficulties to divorces to past and future universes. I think that was fascinating. Let me
Yes.
ask for if you could share one thing shortly, a few seconds, technical leadership, life skills, one thing that you wish you could, from your many years of having seen and been everything you are, the one thing you would share with people today, what would it be?
You've got to listen to people. You can't
Mm,
just wait for your turn to talk. No one's keeping score. There's no points. We're trained so often from school through university or taking an argumentative style, right? You've got to make your point and you've got to support it with evidence and you've got to win, win, win. And that's obviously important. Otherwise, you'd probably starve in our society. But the more curious you are, the more you listen to people rather than reacting, the more you learn about the world, the more you learn about yourself, the more space you leave for something to happen other than this sort of constant, one up, or eventually
yeah,
someone will win or something like that. So, not just pure curiosity, but a willingness and a commitment to listening and understanding the other person's perspective.
I like that. That's really good. That's a great way to end. I have a tradition here, which I stole from the driver CEO, Steve Barlow, which is to ask the next guest a question that they have no idea is coming from the previous guest. This is a strange one. The last question I got asked to give to my next guest, my previous version of this podcast on InfoSec Live with Simon Linstead, was: should humans age gracefully, or are things like Botox, Ozempic, and other things the future, and should we embrace them? I know it's a deep and weird question. I'm sorry, but that's the question I got.
Wow. I think it's interesting, honestly. I think that there is a transition point.
Okay.
I'm vain, and not that I have Botox or anything, but I probably take advantage of easy things to make me look to age gracefully. But I
Yeah.
think there's a certain point at which it becomes ridiculous, and
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is. I don't know if it's when you turn 80 or something. It probably depends on the person and the culture and things like that. But I do think at a certain point, you have to accept that you've moved into the winter of your life, and it's time to take on a new role. And that's where I think I mean, I lived in Los Angeles. You certainly see some people who are, you know, clinging on a little late. And I do think at a certain point you need to, but I think it's a failing of our culture, because we don't make space for elders in our culture. We don't value elders. We value youth and fresh ideas and disruption. And not, I mean, don't get me wrong, I work at startups. Yes, that's all important, but you also need that balance. You need a space for
Yeah.
elders in your tribe, and you need to respect and value them. And I just don't think we've made that something important in our communities, so, or in our society. So I think I don't blame people for chasing the Botox dragon, but for me at least, I do think there's a certain point at which, my parents got older, and there was a certain point at which I just sort of woke up one day and realized, like, oh wow, they're old, you know. And
My kids say that to me now, and I'm not even 40, and they say that I'm old.
Jesus. So I think it's something we can work towards, right? We can make room for people. I mean, maybe even people coming back to cyber, like, people should retire, and but we
Yeah.
should also seek
Make
to
room for the
bring
next
them.
generation.
Yeah, make room, but also we should be seeking them out and bringing them in, and not devaluing their experience just because they worked with punch cards or whatever. We should bring them back for that wisdom
Yeah.
and experience.
It's interesting. We go back to like fashion and cyclical things. Like right now, the 90s is currently all of the fashion that's being used now. I feel like it's the same almost in IT and security too.
Yeah.
Like there is lessons to be learned from 20 years ago that will not come back. Dude, this has been fascinating. I appreciate it. It feels good to be back on the podcast. For those who haven't listened before, these are no script. They are simply my cathartic journey to ask people the questions I want to ask, to learn the lessons I want to learn. If you want to join, feel free to join. If you don't, you can also sod off. But if you want to have a part of it, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever it might be. Ask what topics you want to speak about, who you want me to speak to, and the questions you want to ask, and let's try and learn together. Terry, thank you so much for being on. It's ever a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon on Risking It All. This is Jay Bernardis signing off. Thank you all.